All right, everybody, Chapter 11, Roots of Popular Music. And we're up into the mid 70s. We just heard the last song of the previous chapter with Rock the Boat by the Hughes Corporation and the beginning of disco. Well, we're up to the beginning of disco. It's mid 1970s. Richard Nixon resigns in August of 74. The Vietnam War officially ends early in 1975. And musically, feels like everything has gone disco. One great exception, though, that we want to touch on first, Bob Marley. Bob Marley was a Jamaican musician. He was kind of a demigod in Jamaica. He was as popular as any musician. And he and his band, the Wailers, exported their music to the United States, became popular in the US, not popular in the same way that they were in Jamaica. Their music was not omnipresent, it wasn't all over the radio and whatever, but people liked it and they bought it. His album Legend, over the course of years, became one of the best-selling albums in American history. And so a couple songs that I want you to hear from Bob Marley. But keep in mind, Marley's thematic approach to music, or his thematic approach to the lyrics, tended to be focused on, if not anti-government, then certainly about pro-humanity and pro the people. His Rastafarian beliefs were the core of what he did, and he was also well known for being a heavy marijuana user. So, and it wasn't a question of good or bad or whatever. This was just part of Marley's persona. As a musician in Jamaica, he was unparalleled, and he brought a particular style of Caribbean rock to the States. So we're going to listen to a little bit of Jammin', Bob Marley and the Wailers. Bob Marley and the Wailers jamming. And again, Marley's music often focused on his religion or spirituality, on issues of God and humanity. One Love, People Get Ready, a medley, another Marley classic from this time. Give a listen. Bob Marley and the Wailers, One Love, and People Get Ready. Now, Marley tragically died at the age of 36. He passed in 1981, and he really didn't become prominent here in the United States until 75. So his career in the United States was relatively short lived. He actually died of cancer. There was a lot of rumors that perhaps he had been poisoned by the Jamaican government, that he had enemies in Jamaica. I can't speak to any of that, but the cause of death was listed as cancer. He had been playing soccer, apparently, found a little spot on his toe, and they had it examined only to find out it was a form of skin cancer that had run rampant through his body, and they needed to amputate his toe, and his Rastafarian beliefs prevented him from allowing that. They tried to do what they could, but he ultimately passed away from cancer at the very, very tragically tender age of 36. The late, great Bob Marley. Okay. Next on the list is Peter Frampton. Peter Frampton was a British recording artist who had made a couple albums, and they hadn't really done very much on the charts. But his concerts were well attended and enthusiastically received, and his record company was trying to figure out how can we generate some of the energy that his concerts create on record. And they did some maths, and said, you know what, let's record a concert and put it on record. And that's what they did. The album was called Frampton Comes Alive. Now, there had been live albums by other artists. Uh, Certainly in the late 60s, there was a spate of live albums, concert albums that came around for a lot of different artists in rock and roll through the 70s. But Frampton Comes Alive was really the apex of the idea of live albums. Throughout the rest of the 70s, in fact, lots of live albums were released by lots of major artists, in part, in fact, to try and recreate the success of Frampton Comes Alive. Peter Frampton's Frampton Comes Alive was the #1 album of 1976, and it was enormously successful and did pave the way, continue to pave the way for other live albums to come. Take a listen to Baby I Love Your Way from Frampton Comes Alive by Peter Frampton. Great tune, Baby I Love Your Way, Peter Frampton from Frampton Comes Alive. Okay, Queen. I, as far as bands go, you've all heard me rant on about individual singers from Ray Charles and Sam Cooke to Aretha Franklin. Um, but other than the Beatles, I haven't really ranted on about a lot of bands, maybe a little about the Stones and Led Zeppelin. But as a pop rock band, I think Queen is more of the category of the Beatles than they are of others. Queen is just one of those bands, man, that's just great. Queen did a wonderful um, range of different kinds of songs. If you listen even to their hits, it's hard to believe they were all done by the same band, because as much as a lot of other bands had a signature sound where if you heard a couple of their songs, you could pretty much pick out the rest. Queen's wasn't like that. They did have some harmonics that were very, very traditionally Queen, but a lot of their songs, you wouldn't listen to them and say, oh, that's the same band. The one thing that Queen had was the unmistakable lead vocals of Freddie Mercury. Talk about one of the great singers in rock history. Freddie Mercury is right up there. Now, the fact that Queen was as amazing as they were is one thing. Queen started in Britain, started charting in Britain as early as 72, 73. But they didn't really pick up any steam in Britain until 74. And their first real hit in the States was in 75 called Killer Queen. Great song if you haven't heard it. But in 1976, the rules changed because Queen released a 5-minute and 55-second piece of art that was unlike anything that had come before it, and quite frankly, is unlike anything that's come after it. Bohemian Rhapsody was an operetta, and it was tongue-in-cheek operetta. It definitely wasn't taking itself too seriously. And yet musically, it was very satisfying. And Freddie Mercury was absolutely in his element in this song. And Bohemian Rhapsody would be included 15, 17 years later in the film called Wayne's World. And that was a very popular movie. And as a result of that, Bohemian Rhapsody would be re-released. Now, first time out of the gate in Britain, Bohemian Rhapsody not only went to #1, it became one of the biggest singles in British history. To this day, it remains one of the biggest singles ever on the British charts. In the US, it was successful, not quite as successful. It peaked at #9. And when it was re-released 17 years later, it went all the way to #2 in the US. So again, Bohemian Rhapsody joins songs like Stand By Me and The Twist as one of those rare records that went to the top 10 twice in exactly the same version. Give a listen. You got 6 minutes to spare. This is Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. Great rock and roll. Okay, that's it for now. I'll see you on the next side.